back, viewers. We're here today to have an amazing time with the author Effie about the Tales of Inthya. There is many books already out in this series, and we will speak about this, about writing process and everything that comes to mind. So welcome, Effie. I'm starting with a hard question. Which one of the books in Tales of Inthya is your favorite?
It's not really a secret. I think Daughter of the Sun is probably my favorite. I think it's most people's favorite. I don't even know why exactly. I do think that the themes of, redemption and forgiveness and being able to start over, I think that's, something that I find very comforting and a lot of people find very comforting. And of course, you've got, the enemies to lovers kind of thing going on, which most people also enjoy.
I think for me, it was also like Orsina is so upright and so truthful. I think that the whole change that you see in the goddess because of Orsina, I think it's a really nice rhythm to it.
She's kind of the classic knight in shining armor, almost stereotypical, but I feel like she really makes it work. And it's so fun to have, a character like Aelia, who's basically her complete opposite, and watch them kind of bounce off each other.
What was your inspiration behind Aelia?
I don't know exactly. I've kind of talked about this before, but Orsina was based on a D&D character that I was looking forward to playing. But my Dungeons and Dragons group, we never actually got to play. We never even got to the first session. And I was like, well, I kind of like this character and I'd like to use her for something. I was like, okay, but who am I going to put her with? And I was like, well, who would be her opposite? What kind of character would be the opposite of who she is? And that's kind of how I developed Aelia as someone to kind of contrast with her.
Can I ask what was the inspiration behind the world of Inthya?
It's kind of funny because it was a world that I designed when I was a teenager. I drew the map and I kind of came up with ideas for how each of the countries worked. And then I never wrote a story for it. I had an idea, but I didn't know what I was doing. So I just, threw it in a folder somewhere and forgot about it. And then when I was writing Queen of Efflaria, I had my idea for the story, but I was like, well, what world am I going to put it in? I was like, wait, I made a world 10 years ago, and I never used it. And so I just kind of dropped the story onto the world, and they just kind of interwove really nicely. It all just really fit together. It was kind of like the story had always been meant for the world. I just kind of had to find it. So it was very not usually how I write. I think it's not usually how most people write, but it was just kind of a happy coincidence that it all came together. And the idea to make the world, a queer normative setting and a setting without most prejudices that we are used to on Earth, it was basically wish fulfillment for me. But it was something that I had a lot of fun with, and I think it's something a lot of readers have enjoyed as well.
Did you always plan to create the straightforward, the good gods and the chaos gods?
It's a little bit complicated. You do have, some gods who are obviously good and obviously evil, but there are also some minor ones that are kind of towing the line. Due to the nature of just how, the gods, there need to be bad gods because people have bad aspects to them. So it's kind of it's all kind of everything has its place. It's all the way it's meant to be, if that makes sense.
Did you have the pantheon of gods map out everything from A to B to Z to everything we didn't see already? Or do you just make it up as you go?
So I do have all of the gods in an Excel spreadsheet. I think I had the majority of them down by the time I started writing the second book, but I also knew that I could always add more if I needed to. especially the really small and really specific ones. I would say I had the majority of them down just because I didn't want to contradict myself later, which is very easy to do when the series goes on for as long as this, especially if it's such a small detail. But yeah, I rely pretty heavily on my Excel spreadsheet of gods.
Your world building is really, rich, really deep. There's lots of continents, characters, um, different species. Did you plan this all from the start? Was it, or did you start like plan it and then start writing book one, or did this happen as you wrote the books? Did you sort of add more to the world?
I think, like I said, I do think the majority of it was planned, even if, the map that's in the book, it's only a very small piece of the world, which is, the part where I usually write the stories. But I always wanted there to be a sense that there was also a much larger world beyond the map with, different types of people and different types of stories. And I always did want there to be, magical creatures as well as just, regular humans doing regular human things. And since I had designed the setting first, I think I had the majority of it laid out.
If you needed to pick only one god and only one non-god character to be your absolute either favorite or least favorite, which one of them would it be?
I think my favorite god is probably Sign, the god of animals. And I know he doesn't really show up in the books. He shows up a little more in the short stories. But I just really like his domain. I love, just the idea of a god of animals who values animals like the other gods value humans. I find that to be really nice. As someone who also loves animals. For my favorite human, I don't know. When people ask me who the character most like myself is, I usually say Orsina, because we're both very kind of rules-oriented and maybe a little too idealistic. As far as least favorites go, I think Perlita is most people's least favorite. It's so funny how many people have written to me asking, so does anything bad ever happen to Perlita? And I'm like, that's not how it works. It's sometimes in life people are just bad and they just are, and that's how it is. For a least favorite god, I don't know. I really like all of them, and I feel like they all really fit together nicely.
So in book 5, in Daughter of the Moon, we have a redemption story, a really powerful redemption story. So we have the story of Nethia, who's the villain of book 4. But in book 5, she redeems herself. And actually, when I read the book at the start, I was like, I'm never going to like her. But actually, by the end of book 5, I was really rooting for Nethia to sort of have a future. And is that the kind of feedback you've got from your readers as well? Have they fallen in love with this character, who's actually the villain, but then turns out to be someone else in book 5?
Yeah, I think a lot of people really did like, how dramatically she changed. People liked Aelia's change a lot, but I think Nethia's change was even more dramatic because she went from being Aelia was she wasn't good, but she was kind of harmless and more silly. But Nethia, she was a villain, and she was on her way to becoming a war criminal. And so I think people really do like a dramatic change like that. And I'm glad that it worked because I was afraid that, she was already too far gone for a reader to ever connect with her. But I really, I'm glad that, I was able to pull off her transformation, and I'm really glad that people have seemed to like it.
Is there something that you find easier to write? Is the fight scene something that comes easy, or is dialogue?
I think dialogue is definitely the easiest thing for me. Actually, it's almost easy, to the point where it's a problem, because I'll write a page and I'll realize it's literally nothing but dialogue and I haven't described a single thing. And so it's the characters are standing in a white void just talking to each other, so that I always have to go back and add description. I am so bad about description. People have complimented me on my fight scenes, which is so funny to me because they take forever to write. I always kind of struggle with them, where I find I haven't described enough. I basically have to write my fight scenes twice because I am so bad at describing. But I think they come out good at the end. But dialogue is definitely, it just comes so naturally to me.
Was the Tales of Inthya the first book that you have published?
Yeah, it is. It is the first book I've ever published. I did write a couple other books when I was younger, and I did try to get them published, but they weren't very good. So I'm glad they didn't get published. But yeah, so it was kind of funny. I actually considered myself a sci-fi writer for such a long time. And then I was like, you know what? I'm just going to write fantasy. And I'm not just going to write fantasy. I'm going to write fantasy where princesses are allowed to marry other princesses. It was like the opposite of everything I'd ever written before. And that was what got published. So it was kind of funny.
Do you plan to reignite your old love and write sci-fi?
Yeah, actually, I am hoping to. I think a lot of my author bios say that I write sci-fi and fantasy, which is like technically not true yet because I haven't published any sci-fi books. But no, I have a couple of concepts sitting in a folder somewhere that I do want to get to once I finish this series. I really want to finish the Inthya series before I go jumping into any like really big new projects. But I would be really surprised if I never wound up publishing sci-fi.
What's been the hardest part of world building?
I think probably just keeping track of things, especially in a world this large. I try to keep really good notes, and I have friends who are also like really into my books, and they will like remember little details for me, which I so I so appreciate that. Yeah, I think like I'm always afraid that I will publish an outright contradiction. Actually, in Daughter of the Moon, it very nearly went to print saying that Nara was the 11th in Efflaria, and she's not. She's the 11th in Rhodia. Sign is the 11th in Efflaria, and I straight up forgot until like really, really far into the editing process, and then I was like, oh my god. So, I people ask me how I keep everything straight. I don't.
Keeping everything straight in a queer books, not a thing.
How did you come up with the character names?
I smashed my keyboard. I feel so bad. My audiobook reader, her name is Brenda. She does a fantastic job. I just want to send her a gift basket or something. I feel so bad for her. It's like, I guess when I was writing, like when I was physically writing the first book, it never even, first of all, I didn't even think I was going to get published. And then it never even crossed my mind that people would want an audiobook or people would talk about the books and then actually have to pronounce all the nonsense I come up with. And so I do want to apologize to literally everyone. It's a symptom of me being too much in my own head and forgetting that other people also need to like experience the books.
Usually in queer fiction, your readership is kind of all over the world, all speak English, but it's not all of their first language. What's the funniest pronunciation you've got from a foreigner reader?
Most of my communication with foreign readers is over text. So, because like they'll tweet at me or they'll send me a message on Tumblr. I don't really talk to people, so I haven't like so I don't really hear anything. But people do. I have had hilarious misspellings. I think Reg Madra gets it worst, to the point where people don't even try to spell her name correctly. The war goddess Reg Madra. I think on Tumblr, a lot of people just call her Reggie, which, yeah, I think the thing is, I think that my terrible name choices are kind of an equalizer when it comes to whatever language.
I wanted to ask you about your audiobooks. So Barbara's done a great job with your audiobooks. Did you have a say in choosing the narrator, and have you listened to the audiobooks and did you enjoy it?
Yeah, actually how it worked was really cool because I had no idea how it was going to work going in. So what we did is we went on this website for like voice actors, and you have like auditions. So the audition was like the first I think it was like the first 5 pages of the first book or something. And we put out for like, a female voice actress who could do, and then you could like choose how you wanted the voice to sound, or like all these adjectives. I don't remember what we picked, but I did want something, kind of soft. And so I listened to a bunch of different auditions. We actually got a good amount of them. And I just thought Brenda did a fantastic job. And so, I picked her, and it was just between me and my editor, and it was basically just the two of us kind of going through and deciding. So I think I definitely got more say than a traditional author would, because I think if I was like a mainstream publisher, they would just tell me, this is your audiobook reader, hope you like it, and if you don't, tough luck. So, and I was the one to, listen to the audiobook all the way through to make sure, there were no mistakes or anything like that. Because everything we do is a very small team with, since it's an independent publisher. So yeah, it was, I got to be kind of more hands-on.
Did you enjoy listening to your audiobook, and did anything about the characters change in your mind when you listened to her narrating the story?
I found it so anxiety-inducing to listen to my own books. I'm one of those people who I have a hard time looking back positively on my own work, because all I see is mistakes and what I could have done better and that kind of thing. So it was kind of stressful to have to listen to my own work. I mean, she did a fantastic job. This is not anything like that the reader did like wrong. She was absolutely fantastic. It was just the fact that it's like, oh God, I wrote that? Like, why did I write that? It's so lame. Like, it's so cringy. But that's just entirely on my own lousy self-esteem.
We love your books.
I know. But, as a creator, it's so hard to look back at your old stuff. And, and as she was reading, I was like, you know what? In future books, I think I'm going to pick names that are a little less stupid. Because we also had to make up a pronunciation guide for her. And I'm sorry, Brenda, if you're watching this, I'm sorry.
So you've got 5 books out in Tales of Inthya, a 6th coming. How much book do you think the series will get before it's finished, in your opinion?
My plan at this point, my plan at this point is 6 books in the main series. I also want to release an anthology of short stories, which are right now they're being released every month on my Patreon, but I'm coming to the end of them, and I want to compile them and publish them as an anthology, and then I want to publish book 6, and then I will be done with kind of the ongoing current plot line in the series, and I might just call it quits there. However, I don't want to say I'll never write a book in that setting again, because I do have a lot of ideas, and I do feel like there's things that people still want to see. So, I could do a book 7 or a book 8, but right now at 6, I'm gonna call it quits for at least a little while and try to work on some other things.
What is your writing process like? Do you tend to work on one book, finish the book, and then move on to the next one? Or are you plotting the other books as you're writing the first book or one of the books?
I generally tend to work on one thing at a time. I wish I could do multiple projects at once. I know some other authors do, and it just seems like you get so much more done. But for some reason, I just really need to immerse in whatever I'm currently working on. And just trying to jump between projects, especially if they're in completely different worlds, it really doesn't work for me. It's not something I've ever been able to do.
Do you use beta readers, and do you find that process useful?
Yeah, actually, I have a friend who's a fellow independent author, and actually, before we were even really friends, she was kind of beta reading and editing for me, and she does such a fantastic job. Her name is Katie, and she actually also drew the map of my books that's seen in them. And she does such an awesome job that at this point I can't imagine publishing a book without, getting all of her feedback and her notes, and everything like that. It's so valuable to me.
Do you need a specific setting to write? Are you more pen and paper, computer, silence, music, anywhere, somewhere specific?
I definitely prefer to write on the computer. I wish I could write pen and paper because there's something, very romantic about it. But it always winds up me having to type up everything anyway, and I'm just annoyed typing up what I've already written, and it's just it just seems like I'm wasting my time. I don't really write with music, or it's I'll put on music and then I will either zone out and not hear it, or it'll come to an end and I won't even realize it. And so I always wind up writing in silence in the end, no matter what. Location's not as important, as long as it's not too loud. Although honestly, I can write when it's pretty loud. I don't like to, but it's just kind of a skill that I developed because I have a very large family. And growing up, my computer was always in the kitchen. And so you can imagine how loud it was. And I would just have to, focus on my writing no matter what nonsense was going on behind me.
How important was it as an author for you to make sure the world was queer inclusive?
So I think it's probably one of the most important aspects of the world. When I sat down to write the first book, it was kind of okay, what if we took, the traditional fairy tale of, princess betrothed to a prince, doesn't really know him. But what if they were both girls? And what if that wasn't a big deal? How does the story change? How does it stay the same? I was really interested in exploring how that would come out. So yeah, obviously it was, wish fulfillment, but it was also really important to me just as a storyteller to see a world like this, how would it work, that kind of thing. It wouldn't be the same to me if it wasn't a queer normative setting. And I'm so glad that queer normative settings are becoming more common in fiction now, to the point where I'm hoping it's becoming more of a default, because I feel for a long time there was this assumption that fantasy worlds were they could be the worst of humanity when it came to social issues. It's well, since it's way back when, obviously people are going to be racist, they're going to be sexist, they're going to be homophobic, they're going to be transphobic. But I don't know if that's true. It's I don't think bigotry is something that's inherent to humanity. And I think if you took a human and put them in a different kind of world where, that stuff didn't develop, I think it could be a good thing.
Is there something, a social issue that you did not write about yet that you want to?
Not particularly. I was very nervous about writing Clavida's story because, I'm not trans. And, I don't want to be telling a trans story that's, that I don't really have the right to tell. But at the same time, I do have a lot of, trans readers, and, friends who are trans women who are is there ever going to be a trans protagonist? And I was well, actually, yeah, there's this one that I really want to write. But, I'm a little bit, nervous. I want to do right by her, and I want to do right by you. So that's why it took until the 5th book to actually get, a trans protagonist. And I'm so grateful to all the ladies who helped me, develop her and develop, the mechanics of the change and just every aspect of it. I had so much help. I haven't really confronted any kind of racial stuff yet. I mean, I feel we do see, there's obviously other races that exist. There's, traders from other nations. It's explicitly stated that, there is no slavery in the human countries. I haven't written any non-white protagonists because, again, I'm always afraid of stepping on toes, telling stories that are not mine to tell. And I have always kind of said that if anyone wanted to write something, from one of those cultures in the world of my setting, they would be 100% welcome to do so. Or even I don't know, maybe if I was working alongside someone who did have the right to tell those stories. In the world itself, there aren't really like the sort of social problems that we think of today. So, yeah, I don't think there's anything that I haven't tackled that I want to, unless I'm forgetting anything obvious.
Each of your books can be read as a standalone, but there's also things that link them to other books. And did you plan that right at the start? Was that the intention?
Yeah, actually, because the world, when I designed the world a long time ago, the story that I was kind of planning on telling in it was Daughter of the Moon, but I had no idea like what I was doing with it, or like where it was going, or anything. So when I wrote the Queen of Efflaria, I was like, well, what if this all somehow leads up to Daughter of the Moon? And so the way they interlink is kind of all the lead up to that.
Sort of there's a little mystery in each book. I feel like there's a little bit at the end where we don't completely get the answers. Is there a plan to weave all those threads together in book 6?
Yes. Book 6 is all about those weird little things that nobody wants to talk about. And yeah, book 6 is where that all kind of comes to a head, and all the secrets get revealed, and it's like that kind of thing.
Did you worry at all about writing a series? Did you think it might put people off reading the books further on because people feel that they have to read all the books to sort of read, book 5?
No, I think people enjoy a series. In my experience, people like a series with a lot of books, and I've been, publishing them pretty quickly. So yeah, I mean, it's just kind of the way that, I did want it to be. I did want it to be a longer series and a slower build.
If you could go back in time and change something in one of your already published books, would you do it? And if yes, what would you change?
I think the first book, The Queen of Efflaria, is very different from all the rest, like tonally speaking. Yeah, I think, like, I mean, I was still kind of learning about publishing and about all that. I think if I were to change any of them, it would be the first one. I don't know exactly what I would change, but I think it would kind of fit into the rest of the series a little bit better, just because when I was writing it, I was still kind of figuring things out.
Without giving too many spoilers away, can you tell us a little bit about book 6?
Book 6 is about Isabel. That's Princess Sophie's youngest sister, who I think was mentioned in book 3 by name. She's an adult now, and she's doing some anti-elf work with the Rhodian Navy, and she's basically avoiding her mother because, you remember her mother. Yeah. And so she gets called home because something weird is happening, and so the book is kind of about her thinking that she's kind of too old to find love, because at this point she's like in her 30s and she's still single, and so I think she's kind of given up on that kind of thing. And so yeah, it's kind of about her journey, and yeah, and that's about all I can say without giving away like the major plot. But yeah.
When can we expect book 6?
I'm not entirely sure. I think probably maybe late 2022 or 2023. I do feel bad at how long it's taken, to get to it. But I think I published the rest of the series so quickly that I think I might have burned myself out a little bit. So I really want to do this one justice. I'm so nervous. Like, I'm always nervous when I release a book, but I'm really nervous about this last one. I'm just like, I'm trying my best, and I'm like, this is it. Like, this is the one that everyone's kind of like, they want to know what's going on. Yeah, so I think part of me is also really scared to finish it.
It's hard to say goodbye.
Yeah. Like, on the one hand, I do want to move on to other things, but like on the other hand, this is such a wonderful world. It's like, it's so nice to have a world where all the horrible things that, we deal with in our daily lives just like don't exist. And like everyone gets to be happy. Everyone gets to, have that happily ever after kind of wish fulfillment, whatever.
Do you already know what will be your next adventure in fiction?
I'm really not sure. I have a couple of concepts written down, but I don't know which one is going to appeal to me most.
Have you ever thought of going back in time and maybe writing a story set in the past before the first book?
Actually, no, that's never crossed my mind. I never thought of that.
Oh, we get a new book out of it.
Did you know how it was all going to end when you start writing the series?
I had kind of an idea, but I think I knew most of it would come to me as the series continued building. And, as we got closer and closer, it would also become like apparent to me. But, I always knew that it was going to be a happy ending, of course. I can't do unhappy endings. But, yeah, I think, like, I had a good idea, but, like I said, more kind of revealed itself to me as I went on.
Can I ask, why do some characters end up having blessings and others don't?
It's not really like, I don't know, it just kind of is the way it is, I guess you could say. It's like, that's just how it kind of turns out. I mean, I don't feel like there's enough magic in the world for everyone to have a blessing. And then some people, like, aren't really suited to having a blessing. Like, someone like Adele, I think she's happier without one. I think there is a point, like, I think in book 1, where Kelsey is going around giving, like, random people blessings as adults. And Sophie's like, so are you mad that you didn't get one? And she's like, oh God, no. She's just not really that kind of person. And I think everyone is different, and I think not everyone would really want magic or vibe with it or, whatever.
In the book, the gods take their powers from worshipping. The god of animals. Do the animals worship him?
I do talk about this a little bit in a short story I wrote for Patreon. So animal souls are different from people souls or the souls of, like, magical creatures who are, like, basically people but in, like, different types of bodies. They're simpler and, like, they're smaller. And so he doesn't get as much power from them. And it's not really belief as much as it is kind of like an understanding of him. So it's not really that they worship him, but it is that, like, they are aware of him in kind of a way. And that awareness kind of can translate into something that he can turn into energy the way, like, belief can. And there's also a lot more animals in the world than there are humans. So it kind of balances out. Yeah, all animals, they're from sign, and any kind of shape-shifting animal or, like, like a magical creature, those are all from other gods. Yeah, like Talsia with the werewolves, and Nara with the swan people. And
do you get time to read, and if so, what books do you enjoy reading?
I'm always trying to make time to read. I don't always succeed. I really like to read other, like, lesbian fiction books, especially ones set in, queer normative worlds. It's actually to the point where it's like, if a book isn't lesbian fiction, I kind of drag my feet on reading it, just because I feel like I spent my entire life not reading about lesbians, and then all of a sudden, like, now there's so many books, and it's wonderful. I think the book I just finished reading was Queen of Coin and Whispers, which I know I should have read a long time ago. I take a long time to get to books. I really enjoyed the queer normative setting in that. I really enjoyed the setting in The Winter Duke. I kind of hope the author does another book set in that world, because I really like the world.
I know some authors are afraid to read what they write about, like, a kind of a bleeding effect or mixing where the inspiration comes and stuff like that. Is that something that worry you?
Not really. I couldn't imagine, writing fantasy and not reading fantasy. I mean, I get where you're coming from, but like, I don't know. I mean, I'm pretty confident in my own ideas, and also like a lot of what I use is kind of standard genre fantasy tropes. Like, aside from the fact that everyone's gay and nobody cares, there's not anything too radical going on in, like, the way the world is designed, the laws of how magic works, all of that. I feel pretty confident. I couldn't imagine, cutting myself off from, what other people are writing just because I'm afraid of subconsciously copying. Every book that's written is kind of the sum of every book that the author has read. And so, it's impossible to not be influenced. And I think that's kind of how progress was made.
Can you share with your readers something about you that they wouldn't guess from reading your books?
I do think a lot of people are really surprised to hear that I'm into science fiction, which I know I've already talked about. But I think that does surprise people because I think a lot of people think of science fiction as so serious, and the books I write they're really not serious. They're definitely fairy tales. But I really love sci-fi. I was obsessed with the Star Wars Expanded Universe books as a kid. I read almost all of them. I would read any sci-fi book I can get my hands on. And I'm still into it. Sci-fi and fantasy is basically two sides of the same coin, and I think they both have such incredible potential.
Do you have any advice for new writers?
I think a lot of new writers ask me, what my writing process is like, and I'm happy to tell them what mine is like, but it won't really help them. I always say, you don't need to write how Effie writes. You need to write how you write. Every author has their own way of writing and like weird stuff that they do, and you gotta find out what works for you. Don't try to be like your favorite author. You gotta, figure out who you are and like what you need, and the rest will kind of come.
After you write book 6, do you think you might write another series? And if you did, would you set it in another fantasy world?
I think I want to write a standalone after this. Writing a series is actually a lot of work, and it's a big commitment as well, because if I left the series unfinished, I would never forgive myself. So I think all of the concepts that I have right now are all standalones. So I think I'm probably going to do standalones for a little while until I'm ready to do a series again.
So we're now in the Disrodata section of our videos, where, as usual, we will pitch idea and our guest, Effie Calvin, will just pick this or that. Dogs or cats?
Cats.
Cocktail or mocktail?
Cocktail.
Black or white?
Black.
Days or nights?
Nights.
Pixar or Disney?
Pixar.
TV, movie, theater?
Theater.
Music or silence?
Silence.
City or country?
City.
Hot or cold?
Cold.
Blankets or socks?
Blanket.
PC, PlayStation, Xbox or Nintendo?
PC.
Baseball, hockey, or soccer?
Soccer, I guess.
And that's it.
Effie, thank you very much for joining us today. It was lovely to talk to you.
Oh, thank you so much.
Thank you for your time. It was really appreciated.
Do you have any parting words for your readers?
I'm sorry book 6 is taking so long. I burned myself out.